Hello, everyone. This is Mirko from the World Practice, and I am very pleased to host today's podcast, which is going to be all about a very relevant topic, something that we talk a lot these days about, but still probably not enough. So why not talking with the experts? And today we'll be diving deeper into sustainability matters in general. So I'm very, very pleased to be here today with Ryan Robinson, founder of Plumo Plus, and Ryan, is very, very appropriate person to be talking about this because, as he will explain himself, he's got a background that led him to really look quite heavily into sustainability matters. And the work that he's doing with Plumo Plus is actually, quite pioneering the space in a way that we will be talking about too. Here at the World Practice, we work a lot with several clients who are interested in expanding their sustainability efforts and getting to the next level, not just to meet regulatory compliance, but also really like to embrace a way of doing business that is speaking to their own values and those of their customers. So I just wanted to mention that Plumo Plus and the World Practice are in no way connected. This is not a sponsored podcast, but it's really about bringing along some hopefully relevant pieces of information and good food for thoughts. So Ryan, welcome to this podcast. Thanks a lot for being with us, and maybe you can give us a quick introduction about yourself and your company.
Sure, thanks Miko. My name's Ryan and I'm the founder here and here today to talk to you about Plumo Plus, which is the world's first thermal packaging solution made from recycled feathers. So we have designed this high performance natural packaging solution to protect important items in the life science industries such as medicines or vaccines. So you can send those without them spoiling in transport, thermally protected, and without resorting to things like expanded polystyrene, single-use plastics that have traditionally been very important, but also damaging to the environment. So at Plumo Plus, we're here to understand how can we do things in a better way for our economies, our health, and our supply chains in the future.
Very nice. And you and I were talking before, and you shared a little bit of your story with me. So can you just like our audience, what sparked your interest?
A lot of people ask me, how did I get into making thermal packaging made from recycled feathers? And it's definitely a journey, and it all started honestly looking back as a child. I'm a type of person that loves knowing how things work, and around me the natural world just seems to have a bunch of, I can see a pigeon now eating some seeds in my grass, for example, and there's just so many things happening in the natural world around us which are challenges, and nature has found ways to overcome those with ultimately evolution, different systems, different organisms, different things working together to sort of move life forward. And because of that, I found that very interesting. I went to study that at university. I did biology. I did everything from looking at the rainforest and bugs in the rainforest to astronauts, how they live and survive in space. And I ended up doing a PhD at Imperial College looking at air pollution in the lungs. And so you study such a wide range of aspects in terms of the natural world. You definitely just come away with an appreciation of, wow, nature has figured out some incredible ways of doing things. And then you turn and look towards how we are doing things, what we're doing to the environment, how we're growing, how we're moving through the work that we do, and how can we do better and how can we learn from nature. And that's what I've taken from my own personal journey,
which I find very, very fascinating because in reality, I think you mentioned before, you're working mostly with life science industry, and effectively there is something about the importance of maintaining temperature integrity, which without any shadow of doubt absolutely paramount for products in general and some products in particular. You're talking about biologics, large molecules. Now I remember because during COVID-19 I was very much involved with the life science industry myself. I was part of it. Clearly, at that point, the emergency was so huge that there wasn't really enough of consideration given to sort of like the implications from a sustainability perspective. But now I think there have been some elements of evolution that we witnessed in terms of like how regulators, patients, consumers, clients and customers in general, and the broader stakeholder environment are looking at this. I mean, what have you seen yourself?
I think that, as you say, the COVID pandemic was obviously a very difficult time for everyone in the world, but such an interesting example of what happens, as you say, where needs just outweigh, the short-term needs outweigh every sort of other consideration. And I think for many reasons, understandably. What sustainability is about and where things have been changing is sustainability is not thinking about today, it's not even thinking about tomorrow, it's about thinking about the core word of it. How do we make sure this can continue to happen almost indefinitely, right? And I think that the shifts that we have seen in the recent years, again, the pandemic itself was a good sharp shock to show what happens when you don't have to consider anything and what's the difference in the way we carried out our business. But when you have a greater amount of information now flowing around the world, and I mean that from consumer level to boardroom reporting and KPIs and analytics, when you have this, I think that it's naturally trended us towards realizing that things are getting worse. Before, I think it was totally possible to ignore it more, but the information is too free-flowing now that it's very hard to ignore. And because the pessimist in me also believes that things have to get bad for things to change sometimes, and we're now definitely at that point where things are getting bad. And so a combination of those factors are driving us towards hopefully important change for the immediate future.
So I guess effectively, it is obvious that there is an increased level of pressure if we talk about expectation by customers. So as you said, information is free flowing, so effectively people know. And if you do something right, they know. If you do something wrong, they also know. And without any shadow of doubt, you will pay for that. There will be a backlash somehow. So the point is, considering that the pressure side, the expectations, likewise, and still, we see certain businesses, certain industries that are probably not to the level of sustainability where they should be. What do you think is hindering them from going down that road?
Yeah, I think unfortunately sometimes the pressure isn't strong enough, and that's also the reality, and it will get strong enough, but it's just not there yet. And I think we can talk to life science, and what we have as a product is also very, very relevant for this. We're eternally weighing up the risk and the reward of everything that we do, and some of the sustainable solutions, some of them are probably quite easy to implement, others are fairly radical or even if not technically difficult to do, radical in terms of the approach and the mindset that needs to change. And so I think those can be genuine barriers for people's adoption. For us, for example, we recognize that we are absolutely releasing a very innovative solution into a very legacy set of logistics industries and supply chains. So getting people used to the idea of the change, feeling comfortable about it when it's been working for decades, if not longer, those things is just inertia that you have to work through. And I think through increased conversations and ultimately down to the individual people that you speak to in any journey, be it a corporate giant or a small business, it's the individual people that are making a difference now. And I truly believe that we are having a new way of thinking, a new generational thinking in every individual, and that's going to help us reduce the barriers and the resistance to change going forward.
So why don't we talk about it just for a moment, because you hinted to the product, and I guess it's just fair to share with our audience what this is all about.
Yeah. So you've worked in the life science sectors and the logistics, as you mentioned. There are some very important items, vaccines, biological medicines and compounds that need to be transported. And that's critical for human health around the world. A lot of medicines need to be kept at certain temperatures, otherwise they spoil, and that would be disastrous both from a financial point of view but also from a human health perspective. So entire industry has sprung up to provide temperature controlled logistics, especially for the life science industries. So a drug manufacturer can rely on these partners to transport these medicines safely and at the correct temperature. Now, there's many different ways of doing that. One of the important ways that happens in this industry is the use of expanded polystyrene and other plastic foamed insulation materials. They are, we've all seen them before. It's the white light styrofoam material. It is a pretty good insulator, but what are the considerations about, where does it come from upstream? It's a petroleum-based product. What happens at the end of life? They just end up in landfills. They're very lightweight. They take up a lot of volume and space, and they just basically last forever, hundreds of years, if not longer, breaking down. That's what happened and needed to happen, as you say, needs must. But as we progress and sort of grow up as a society, where can we take innovation from other areas to do things in a better way. And so that's what the philosophy behind Pluma Plus is. You know, we've taken recycled feathers, which are already used and have been reprocessed from bedding, clothing, you know, duvets, these kind of things that we know keep you warm and are very good insulator. And even, as I said, from nature, you know, nature has designed these materials over millions of years to be highly effective insulators. We engineer that material, these recycled feathers, into a high performance textile, and then we use that to create insulation material for a shipment. So now you can keep your medicines chilled and protected, delivered, without using the expanded polystyrene. And you mentioned briefly about what's been the resistance to change. I think a lot of good work has happened in sustainable packaging across many different industries. What has been a struggle in the thermal packaging sector, I would say, is that the performance of some of the other natural materials have been basically not as strong as what the pharmaceutical industry needed. There was fear, there was risk, so they opted to stay with the plastics. We've developed a best-in-class solution that's fantastic in its thermal performance, and so we think this is the game changer now to say actually a natural material, a natural solution can provide the level of performance that something like the life science industry needs. And now the product's getting out to clients and they're trialing it and we're getting great results. So it's an exciting time.
Results as in like...
Yeah, so as you know, again, lots of testing, lots of validation, lots of quality checks. So for example, a US biotech put it through their internal validation processes, and that involves, you know, taking the box, loading up with the coolant, setting it up as if they would run a delivery, and measuring the temperatures inside. And as long as those temperatures stay in the correct, levels, that's what we mean in terms of great success. So we're now going through that process with a number of different clients and prospects, and getting the first units out into the market. So it's very exciting.
Excellent. So I think it's very, very promising. And obviously, as you said, if ducks can stay warm in winter time with their feathers, why can't we or our products, right?
And we do that across a lot of different things. As you say, there are natural materials in many different areas that we're now using, and we have been using for thousands, if not hundreds, tens of thousands of years, as humans. So it's about rethinking how we're doing things and thinking, what if there's a different way?
I like you mentioned rethinking, because effectively you mentioned something before about the amount of innovation that's happened in the space lately, and obviously, Pluma Plus is just a testimony to that. And yet, there is some inertia somehow. So I think, thinking in broader terms, because here at the Wolf Practice, we also witnessed many clients' requests lately, a cry really for help on their sustainability journey. But do you think that out there in the industry, manufacturers, and we can certainly focus more specifically on life science because that's your domain of expertise, but do you think that there is some elements of readiness, food readiness, complete unreadiness, what's the state of the nation from what you have seen yourself?
I think that there is a lot of positive intention, and I don't believe they're all just doing it just for to tell a good story. I do believe there's genuine positive intention, both in corporates themselves, but also, as I said, on an individual level. And I think that then you hit the very clear reality, and again, I'll use my nature-based analogy. I don't know if you remember at school the food web or the ecosystem web, the picture you see of how everything is connected, the fish is connected to the plant, it's connected to the oxygen. And as I, again, came through this, I could see that same web across corporates, supply chains, economies, whatever you're going to call it, society. And the reality is you are pulling one part of the web, and when you do that, so many different ripple effects happen that pulls you back to the original position, because that's the equilibrium. You go into an ecosystem and pull something out, very quickly things shift and that thing comes back in. So I think there is good intention, and I think there is good willingness to try, and I think you hit the very real reality of inertia, as you said, and the difficulty in detangling this web that is essentially a web of equilibrium, and it's settled in an area for a reason. So how do we move away from that equilibrium? It's going to require a lot of effort.
And for the effort to happen, to move out of the equilibrium, what do you think is going to be the big push, or like the key drivers really pushing companies to pick the pace?
If you met me in person, I'm a naturally very sort of enthusiastic and positive type of person. And on this one matter, I can acknowledge there's some pessimism. As I said before, I think that we are very close to it getting much worse. I think it still has to get a little bit worse for the rapid change. And again, you've already brought it up. What happened with COVID? What happens when Climate change knocks out a bunch of, as it has already done, but even further, crop cycles, and water issues occur, and mass migration kicks in, and suddenly there's mass unemployment because of and all these societal things start kicking in. It will feel like an emergency. It doesn't feel like an emergency still now, unless you're just, in the industry and reading the articles. And what happened in an emergency? We were able to mobilize and create vaccines and do incredible things that were never done before in the history of mankind. So the pessimist in me thinks that is one of the things that will happen. And I do think that it won't be great, but human beings are fantastic. We will create solutions to these problems, but unfortunately that will be once things are quite, even worse. And if you ask me on the optimism side, I do think, again, to my point of information sharing, the more that this becomes a topic that is, because I fully believe that the general public, knows about these matters, at least on a surface level, that will continue to improve and become more transparent. And I think that mass increase in knowledge about what's going on will drive change, because it will drive change both from external and internal measures. So I think information is so important in this journey.
Well, in that regard, I'm going to ask you a uncomfortable question. Okay, so because you're out there testing out the market with your new solution, I'm sure there is probably some traction with some clients and maybe some resistance with some others. I would say, if you were to pinpoint one or two of the key objections you received or you experienced so far to the implementation, what would they be?
Yeah, I think one of the things when dealing with natural materials is the fact they are natural, and the fact that they are not synthetic plastics that have very clear structures and from a material properties perspective. And for what we do, material properties are very important. It gives you the performance that you need to make sure that this solution protects your medicines correctly. So naturally we're going to see, and have seen on occasion, people saying, well, how do we know that, what's the quality like? How do we know that every single time it's going to be the same? And these are important questions and to answer. And obviously what we do is we build in a fair amount of contingency into the product. Again, I think this is where what we've got used to when it comes, and we can talk across many different areas of basically convenience, performance, cost, and all these other things. We have reached these levels with synthetic or artificial man-made materials or solutions, systems that do provide you with these things, but come at a hidden cost on the other side. And if we were honest about the full cost of these things, we would be making slightly different decisions. So that's where we see some resistance, and just an education piece on saying, yes, we acknowledge you've been using this plastic before. Here's what we have now. It will let you be protected. It will protect your drugs. We built in the contingency, run the tests, show that. We can show you the data as well. And ultimately, this will mean a better solution for everyone in general, planet, people, and everything. So I'd say that's one of the key, I think, barriers when you're introducing a natural material. And look, it's an obvious thing, but people just say, oh, feathers, that's very unusual. What's going on here? And how's this material? What is it like? And we provide many assurances. Again, it's post-consumer recycled material. It's already been through plenty of washes and checks and then re-washed again, and it's been safe enough for you to sort of sleep and wrap yourself up in and climb Mount Everest in. So again, rethinking what can we do with this material, preventing that from being thrown away, using it to replace plastics. So it's about just sharing how we have done things is really important as well to reducing some of those barriers.
Excellent. And thanks for being candid about this. Obviously it is clear that particularly in life science, consistent foreseeability, repeatability of process from a regulatory perspective is just paramount. There is something you mentioned there. You also talked about cost and the true cost of it. And I just had a consideration flying off my mind, which is a number of companies actually in the past have experienced situations whereby the cost for not doing things right in a sustainable manner did by far outweigh the cost for doing it right. And on the contrary, when they started taking way more sustainable position, this turned into a competitive advantage. And thinking about, because we talked about this in our weekly newsletter, thinking about, for example, Unilever and their sustainability program, Nestle and their fair sourcing practices. The list goes on and on and on. But what I find very, very peculiar is that really like the positive impact, even from a pure economic perspective, like returns, repeated customers, revenue boosts, because of the brand image, reputational gain, it's quite substantial. So I'm still puzzled to see and to witness that in reality, in many industries, and life sciences, unfortunately, no exception to this, there seems to be like an incomplete approach to the overall business case calculation. I mean, what's your take?
It's the short-term analysis is much easier when you don't have to do all the tests and the investigations on what is the longer-term benefits. I as you say, I imagine now that is becoming more clear, at least at some level, and there'll be organizations that can help you try to identify this and ultimately score it. And I think it's one of the natural challenges that we face in our inevitable pursuit that we've undertaken to optimize, to grow, to improve, to measure, to track, is that everything is calculated and everything is assessed, and there's good reasons to do that. But when systems become quite complex, and sustainability can be one of those topics, the calculation has to go deeper and deeper before you can come to and more complex, and that's difficult to do and difficult to do accurately. So I think we may get there in terms of being able to model that a bit better and present the strong business case. I had one of the presidents of one of the fellowship programs I was as a part of, and I cannot remember the quote, but basically said, doing green makes money. It does when you look at the maths and you work things out. Talk about your supply chain being more sustainable. How good is that for your business to know that in 5 years' time your supply chain is going to be there, in 10 years' time your supply chain is going to be there, not that you're just extracting and then you wake up in year 7 and oh no, this has collapsed. What's the cost of getting a new supplier? So it sounds very easy to conceptualize. I think what happens is the problem is when you start to calculate, when you start to try and quantify some of what we've just said, it's not as obvious, and that's when the barrier hits.
Totally agree. Also because if we look at the broader stakeholder environment, even from an investor's perspective, I mean, the attention that is starting to be paid to sustainability matters is quite substantial, in that obviously they know that non-sustainability is actually not sustainable over time, and they want to invest in a business that is set to last. But because we are talking about future, maybe the one question I wanted to ask you is, what is it that excites you about the future in this space? I mean, where do you see the trends, or is there like any particular project that you are mostly aroused about?
I think before I pick any couple, I think one of the really good things is when you are working in this space, you get exposed to a lot of innovators working on sometimes quite odd things. And we're working on recycled feathers for life science packaging. That's quite odd. But you begin to realize that for every, I don't know what it is, 10,000 people, one person is working on making the world, genuinely making the world a better place. And I think that provides a lot of comfort. So even the ones I don't know about, there are people out there working hard to solve a lot of important issues. I think from a climate perspective, I think some of the really important work is going to be around food security and things like this, because as I alluded to before, I think that people who are working on crop resilience or other such matters, I think that's really important, because when someone says we're only about 4 meals away from anarchy, there are some very pressing issues. You can be too warm and it can cause a lot of issues with your health and things like this, but it's not a long time before if some of the fundamentals of our society start breaking down, that's going to be a real problem. So I'm impressed when people are working on new ways to feed the world and keep everyone, sort of safe and ultimately happy. So that's really important. And again, I think actually one of the biggest tools that we should be employing now that feeds into everything is education. And it's the same reason I talk about information and transparency and things like this. If I was the king of the world, I would pull a little bit of money out of everything, to be honest. Every service we provide, just a few % here, and put it all into a pot that says education, because I think that would be the best way of having a more sustainable future. If people knew how to feed themselves better, look after their health, make more conscious decisions, and educated about these topics, I think that would be a massive boost. So people are working in the, call it the education space in this area, I think is also important, and it's not just for kids but also for adults and business leaders and all these sorts, so I think that's also something that's really important for the future.
And I think it is fair to say that there's start to show some elements of this, particularly with the newer generations. I mean, we're not very old ourselves, the two of us, but still, I mean, the obviously generations which are at least 20 years younger than us, are probably entering the employment world, and they're starting to come in even into their own employees with a certain set of expectations, and they can be vocal. And same goes for consumers, obviously. New clients, new purchasing power is starting to shift towards this newer generation that have a completely different approach to this kind of topic. I mean, they were born in a world that was ready for them to be receptive to this. And of course, social media plays a major role in that because information is flowing.
And those people are now becoming procurement managers, executives for corporates, right? So those people are starting to just take that personal mindset into the corporate as well. So as I say, it will help.
Exactly, and that's very promising. So I would say let's try and wrap it all up here, because we started from considerations over the past couple of years and COVID, etc. We talked about the present, what's going on with innovation, and now we're talking about the future. So I think it's been like a very quick overview, past, present, and future, but very, very helpful. I found it extremely insightful. So thank you a lot for that. Before saying goodbye to our friends, listeners here. If anybody wanted to learn more about Plumo Plus or get in touch with you, I mean, what they should be looking at?
Sure. I mean, like most companies, we have a website, so head to plumoplus.com and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Ryan Robinson at LinkedIn, and you'll find me pretty easily. Just connect, and happy to have a conversation.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And of course, we here at the Wolf Practice would be very, very happy to support you in your sustainability journey. It's something that is very much consistent with our own company values. So it's something that we take very, very close to heart. So Ryan, thank you so much again. This was really interesting and extremely insightful. And I'll be looking forward to our next podcast together.
Sure. All right. Thanks, Rico.
Thank you.